My name is Julia Barfield, and I lead the early childhood education portfolio at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Our whole focus is to educate and mobilize the business community to address childcare as a workforce issue. So my goal is that people like Sam are less lonely in those conversations, and that we have more businesses represented in conversations to address childcare as a workforce issue. So I have a great panel of local leaders who really are focused on solutions, and I'm so excited to introduce you to them. For quick housekeeping, you have a few index cards on your table. If you have questions for the panel, we've got short and sweet. It'll be about 30 minutes, but we'll have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, please write them down and then wave them, and someone will magically appear and bring them to me. So I am based in Washington, D.C., so when Laura said, do you want to come to San Diego in January, I said, twist my arm. But I'm so inspired by this report, all of the faces that are in this room. I think this is an incredible example of what partnership can be, and you all are evidence of that. So without further ado, we have Jack Schaeffer, who is the president of the Police Officers Association here in San Diego. We have, I was going to call you a Congress member. Not yet. We have Councilmember Cate, who is an incredible advocate. And we have Sarah Hassaine, who is leading diversity and inclusion at Qualcomm. And last but not least, we have Councilmember Ward, also an incredible advocate here. So I would love to get your first impressions of the report from each of you and kind of what stood out to you. I know some of you have personal connections to this information. So just quickly, what kind of stood out to you from the report and why?
Well, the report to me, it really reinforced what we've been doing for about the last 2 years. We've been trying to find answers for our officers, and a lot of the things that you all found really made sense to what we were looking at. So the same thing is going on with police officers as other people in the workforce. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it shed light on what at least my personal experience was with my wife and I, with our daughter now, who's 18 months old, and that's obviously we're not the only ones who are going through this. So many San Diegans are going through the same thing, and really just motivated myself to figure out additional solutions of what we can do to address what is really a crisis in San Diego.
I'm going to use the same word as reinforce. So coming from a program and policy perspective at Qualcomm, it made me think, can we do more? Are we doing enough? And what are some of the other additional services that we can provide our working parents?
I think what's most stark is the supply and demand imbalance, and I know the report talked about 335,000 and 150,000 spaces, 140,000 spaces available. I'm also informed about, that's up to age 12. When you look at the 0 to 5 range, and that's 150,000 children under 5 years old in San Diego County, 70,000 licensed spaces available. I talk about my personal story, like my colleague, Councilmember Cate, where we just had a second child, and trying to get him into daycare took us 11 months, and thank goodness we have grandparents in town to be able to make ends meet, because both of us are working parents, and I certainly have a very aggressive job schedule. But this is, that personal reflection as well, I think, is underscored by that supply and demand imbalance. We weren't going to settle for reduced quality. We weren't going to settle for having to find a place that was 10 miles outside of a normal daily commute. We were trying to get something close to work, close to convenience, and close to our pocketbooks.
Wow, 11 months. I hadn't realized that. I mean, and that's the burden on you and your wife, right? So we know that childcare is a barrier for working parents to enter, re-enter, and stay in the workforce. I think either Chris or Sam or both said that earlier. So I was actually surprised to learn that San Diego does have one of the lowest female labor force participation rates. Councilmember Ward, Cate, sorry. Do 3
Not
Chris's
the first, not the last,
today.
so it's okay.
All the time.
I know, I'm sorry about that.
Even the mayor does it too. So.
Okay, well, thanks for being so kind. Can you speak to kind of what you think the impact of that low participation rate from women in San Diego has on the local economy and the role that childcare could play in that?
Well, I mean, it's making that decision, right? Decision whether to be in the workforce or to take care of your child. And unfortunately, that lack of supply and the cost really epitomizes that decision and really reinforces that decision. And so what we're trying to do is how do we look at increasing the supply to hopefully make it more accessible, hopefully lower the costs for those individuals and those mothers particularly who want to re-enter the workforce. My personal side, my wife was very, very fortunate that she was able to take time off. She was never sick previous in her job, so she accrued a lot of time off. And she was able to take 6 months with our daughter. And after that, similar to Councilmember Ward, I mean, we were on a wait list. I think we're actually still on the wait list at her employer. And we had to commute to our parents' house, my in-laws' house in Oceanside every day until we were able to find a location that was willing to wait. Luckily, a good friend of ours moved to Washington, D.C., and their child that was in that residential home facility left, and we were able to snag that spot. But that burden of either commuting or making these difficult choices really doesn't provide for what we want, which is that economic growth, the economic inclusiveness to happen here in San Diego. And for a city like San Diego, this is something that should be a no-brainer and top of minds to either the private sector, nonprofit sector, or especially the public sector.
Absolutely. And you highlight all of those challenges when things are going well, right? And so like one little detail throws a wrench in the whole system. Councilmember Ward, can you talk about, as the employer, as the city as the employer, kind of what you all have done to improve employees' access to childcare?
So right out of the gate last year, we had just our annual updates to a lot of our land development code, and we made it a priority to make sure that some of the low-hanging fruit that we could do to be able to just reduce the permit processes for new child development centers that was taken down to several levels. So there's streamlining, so there's you can get from A to Z a lot faster, and so we were able to get that code update happening as well. For the representative of downtown and a lot of our urban neighborhoods here in Council District 3, we have a lot of vacant ground floor commercial retail space. We also have a desert here downtown. We're trying to make this a livable, vibrant community where you can live, work, and play all in the same place. But if there is just a absolute void of child care development centers down here, this is a problem. So, we still have, fortunately, a lot of interest here. I continue to meet with property owners, with developers, others that want to build downtown, and they say, what's the vision? What does downtown need? And the first thing out of my mouth is child development centers. Making sure that you're tying it to that workplace, making sure that you're tying it to that new large residential project, that's going to be key for the city to really incentivize a lot of that direction. And talk about our employees later, too.
Okay, great, thank you. Sarah, what about at Qualcomm? What have you seen that supports kind of what we've been talking about as this premise for childcare?
So I'll say at Qualcomm we have a two-pronged approach. We have our policies, so we provide up to 4 months for maternity and paternity leave. And we also have a lot of services, resources, and toolkits for our parents. For example, we give them a list of childcare centers nearby. We would love to have more near Qualcomm, to be honest. We don't actually have childcare services on site, but we have them across the street, just a few blocks away. But the number one complaint we hear is that it's expensive. So I've heard across the gamut from our parents, au pairs, nannies. I've heard everything. There's definitely diversity when it comes to childcare options that I've heard from our parents. And when it comes to our programs, we offer different support groups and budgeting. So we have a group for infant parents. We do a kids' day. We have for nursing mothers. And so we're just trying to provide different services as well and hear what they have to say just through our climate surveys.
Great, thank you. Jack, what about you? I think it's new for many people in the room to think about the Police Officers Association being in this conversation. So what have you heard from police officers about finding childcare?
Well, we've done a couple of surveys, and not only is the availability and the price a problem for our members, but the hours that we work. Most daycares are open from maybe 6 to 6. We have officers working, 24 hours a day. We also have many jobs that require on-call. So not only for us would it be important financially for our officers, but I think also for their wellness issues and their quality of life, because there's a lot of stress that goes into where am I going to take my kid today, and we think that by providing good quality health care or child care for our officers would actually make them better officers and less stressed out about things, which helps them help people more.
Absolutely, yeah. So the report talks about how childcare is broken down. The system is complicated, and it's broken down into problems of scarcity, cost, inconvenience, and then varying quality. Councilmember Cate, can you talk about why parents maybe in San Diego have to get onto the wait list in so far in advance.
It has to do with supply. I mean, again, our personal experience, we got on the wait list at the beginning of my wife's second trimester, and we were still looking even well into 6 months after our daughter was born. So from our standpoint, we're trying to look at how do we increase the supply of quality childcare in San Diego. And so the one thing that we felt and our office felt is maybe an easier lift than, say, a actual center and a commercial location is on the residential childcare facility side. How can we increase the number of residential childcare centers that are near neighborhoods where people live and in these areas where we have childcare deserts? And so we put forward an idea, a plan that we would try to incentivize the creation of more residential childcare facilities in San Diego by offering a $1,000 a year incentive if you start a new or expand your current residential child care center in your home. And we would give you that $1,000 each year for the first 3 years to hopefully try to cover any type of upfront cost, facility improvements you need to do, whatever it takes to start that. We are partnering with the YMCA and hopefully going to have that on the ground running in the next few months, fingers crossed. A lot of things take time at the city, unfortunately. But what can we do to spur that development and increase that supply to make it easier for folks to identify locations, get in there so they don't have to be on the wait list for a year or 2 years before they can find that place that they feel comfortable with to put their child in?
Absolutely. So once you increase supply, we still have an affordability issue, right? So Councilmember Ward, what has the city done to address affordability for childcare?
One thing we did, we fought really hard, Councilmember Cate and I, to get a childcare coordinator position finally reinstated in our city workforce. So we had that budgeted, and now we're hiring up for that. That person will be responsible to make sure that all of our employees have that resource available to help them find affordable options, to be able to help them find even a space somewhere in the community that makes sense for them and their daily routes. And also be able to look for partnerships and programs that are going to increase the supply for our city workforce as well. So it's really about, that the key to success here for us as a community is really maximizing all of those partnerships, whether it's with, education enrichment systems or neighborhood house, whether it's with the county of San Diego. We're looking for city-owned land right now. I think we have a space downtown right now through our former redevelopment agency that previously was a federal site, but we want to flip that and convert that. And we have that partnership now coming online again with the neighborhood house for an additional 100 spaces. And that would be available both to the general public, something we would market certainly towards city employees as well. We have a huge resource in the U.S. Navy, and so we started those conversations earlier last week. They are, of course, very stressed with a lot of our sailors that are being deployed, being realigned here to San Diego, and cost of housing, cost of childcare with a lot of young families is really a burden and barrier. Sometimes their spouse moving in here has to cease or put a pause on her or his career because somebody's got to stay home and actually take care of the kids, and chances are they don't have family here in town because they're moving here. So they have actually realigned so many of the federal dollars and resources to be able to help us actually build more facilities and have partnerships with the general population.
Wow, I'm really impressed with how many partnerships you all have going on here. I cannot stress this enough. This is very unique across the country. I travel all the time, so you guys are a pocket of hope. So now I'm off script. Sarah, can you talk about what Qualcomm has done for both salaried workers and then also your hourly wage folks? Because we did see that the chasm is for your low or middle income parents.
Yeah, so two things. So if you're full-time salaried, you get 12 weeks off we call it bond leaving or just personal time off. And then if you're non-salaried or a contractor, you get six weeks. Last year, we instated flexible hours, which was a first time for Qualcomm, and I think it was really great because we have a lot of parents that have to leave around 3. And the whole conversation was, I have to go home, I have to pick up my kids, I have to get dinner going. And the problem is there are people at Qualcomm who pretty much work, 15, 16-hour days easy. So they get in around 6, leave at 3, and then they get back online in the evening. So that actually has helped. I've seen a wave of cars leave starting 3:30, and everyone gets back online later, which is not necessarily the healthiest, but I think it has actually helped alleviate a lot of the pressure of having to be in the office, and you can still get your work done. So just trying to, again, meet needs where both needs are being met.
So it sounds like from that you're listening to what your employees have needed as far as childcare goes. Can you talk to any business leaders in the room or even across the country to say, what would you ask them to do to address this issue?
Yeah. How much time do you have? So there are the policies, making sure that you review the policies. We actually put out climate surveys about 3 times a year, and that really helps, just getting the pulse of what our employees need and what they're asking for. We have strong advocates. A lot of our affinity groups and clubs on our Qualcomm campus are run by employees, so it's self-driven. And so they're the ones that raise their voice. So I think, as an employer, asking your employees what you think they need. Or they'll tell you what they need. Number 2, have the resources in place for them to develop and bring in the resources that they need. For example, our nursing mothers group, they constantly bring in lactation consultants. They brought in self-acupuncturists. We just did an infant CPR class. We actually do that 3 times a year, and we've seen our numbers go up. It used to be 40, 50, now 90 people are coming in, and we're seeing majority male versus and then female. Before it started off, we actually rebranded. It used to be called Working Mamas Group. We rebranded it to Q Parents. Participation went up. Going back to inclusion, making sure that you're using the language that's very inclusive. All of our activities for our parents are during lunch. We found that that's the best time. And also, for your companies, making sure that you're scheduling any talks, programs, phone calls during that core hour of 10 to 3. Because we've seen participation drop if we do an event after 4 or 3:30. You're not going to get your employees there, unfortunately. And they're not even going to be able to call in. So we try to be mindful of their schedules, of their needs, and have the programs in place. This year, we actually put in expectant mother spots. And I cannot tell you, this was something I worked on for months, I fought for, and now I'm getting all these emails, we need more. And so when you start doing something, you start realizing that you're giving this, you're kind of opening the path for more feedback. And it's been great learning and hearing about the services in our nursing rooms that are needed, and the guest speakers. We're actually bringing Reeve Rodsky, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she wrote this great book about being a working mother, and participation, I mean, we're sold out already, and it's an event in May. So just trying to always see the resources and make sure that our employees feel supported.
Wow, that's really impressive. I mean, I challenge businesses. I could say, 100% of businesses need to do something. So I think it's a great example of what you have done to meet the unique needs of your workforce. Councilmember Ward, can you talk a little bit more about Cate, oh gosh. It's early. That's not even an excuse. Cate, can you talk about what you all have done additionally to support the small business owners who are childcare providers themselves?
First off, more expectant mother parking spaces, please. Those are amazing. But I think the biggest thing what we're trying to do is incentivize the growth of facilities throughout the city, particularly in areas where we're focused on job centers. So I'm very fortunate. I represent the Mesa as well as Kearny Mesa, and so we love Qualcomm, 100%. But we need more childcare centers in Serrano Valley and Serrano Mesa. There's, I think, there's a kinder care that allows for children younger than 2.5 at that facility. That's the only one that I know that's in Serrano Valley. And Kearny Mesa, and what we're trying to provide there between housing and new jobs, it's going to be the job center in San Diego with mixed-use developments. We need to make sure that we're inspiring and really invigorating those types of discussions to have these facilities in these locations where we're going to have tens of thousands of people come every single day, either living or working in that area, to ensure that they have childcare. I know Councilmember Ward has talked about downtown as well too, and making sure that we have this growth in jobs and housing. How do we make it easier to inspire people to look at this type of investment? And from my standpoint, I'm not a developer. I don't own or operate a childcare facility, but what I want to hear from folks is what can we do to make it easier for people? Laura talked about sparking imagination. What can we do? What hindrances are there from our permitting side or our land use side that we can say, we're going to eliminate this. We need to recognize that we need this growth, and how can we implement that sooner rather than later? And that's where we need to hear from our nonprofit partners, our employers, others, to say, okay, how is the city getting in the way, and what can we do to break down those barriers?
That's a great point. Jack, can you tell me about what the Police Officers Association is doing to address childcare?
Yeah, so well, it started about 2 years ago. So I think the first steps, and you covered it really well, was you have to find out from your membership, from your employees, what is their need. I think everybody are unique, and like any issue, there's not one answer. There's probably several answers depending on what individual you're talking about. So, and then flexibility. The whole thing was beyond overwhelming. Originally, I have 2 kids, and I never had to use daycare because I have so much family in town. But in talking to members and seeing their unique problems, and then trying to have to like turn on a different part of my brain and figure out these things. And luckily, I have a great team. We were figuring out some of the answers to it, and we ended up partnering with KinderCare because they just seemed to be the right fit for what we were trying to do. And ultimately, we'd like to have our own facility run by KinderCare, who has the curriculum and all that stuff, that we think can meet the needs of a lot of our people. But it's not going to be everybody. So there's going to be some in-home care that's going to need to happen with our overnight workers and people that get called out in the middle of the night. And those are answers that I'll have to look for later. But I think constant dialogue with members is the only way that I'm going to keep on top of this.
And to understand what their needs are so that you can make the schedules work.
Absolutely.
What challenges have you run into? Because I am sure there have been many.
Well, originally there's a lot of regulation in this area, and for good reason. But it just, in reading the books and books and books that we were starting to do, I don't know. I don't have that kind of attention span, so I had to I had to get a lot of people doing a lot of different things. But like I said, with all the people I had working on it, our whole board of directors and staff and everybody, we found those solutions, on how to do the different things by going to the experts. And I highly recommend that, because trying to navigate that minefield is ridiculous if you don't know what you're doing.
Right. You make such a good point about you doing what you do well and then leaning on resources that are available.
Yes.
Last but not least, Councilmember Ward, can you talk about what we have to look forward to in San Diego?
Well, I'm really excited that this is a full audience, and so that walking into this room here today gives me a lot of hope that we actually have a lot of opportunity coming forward to actually connect all these dots between government, our service providers, and everybody else that touches this space, working parents, and the advocates for them, to really try to up our supply and really work on affordability questions. One thing that was alarming to me too, we talk about that gap, that chasm where people are falling through. I'm informed from those that are deeper in the data here that about 20% of the subsidy that we get from existing resources in Sacramento is actually returned to the state, because we're not connecting the dots locally here between some of those income brackets and the people that actually could qualify for some of that subsidy. So you want to actually start to help that chasm. How about we actually go back there and start to work on that funding formula that is going to be able to maximize that opportunity here, just for starters, and then we can also layer on top of that, work at some of the additional state subsidy and other resources that we can particularly enjoy here in the local community. If we can, as you said, lead the way in San Diego here and show that the community is ready to actually develop the space and train the workforce and actually get a fully comprehensive, universal, not just preschool, but also child development opportunities here for the youth that deserve it and the families that need it, I think that we can show the rest of the state that this is possible too.
Absolutely. What a great note to end on. And I'm told there's no time for Q&A, so I'm sorry that I lied at the beginning. But I just want to thank all of you so much for your leadership. I really think this is really helpful. So thank you.